this is Peter Konechny with Medievalist.net, and I'm here with Professor Walter Goffart, who's Professor Emeritus of History at the University of Toronto and now with Yale University. And he recently came out with an article, Rome's Final Conquest, the Barbarians. Thank you for talking with us.
Well, I'm very glad to be here, Peter.
It's been commonly thought that the Roman Empire was overcome by barbarians, and one historian even said that Rome did not die a natural death, it was murdered. But your article comes up with a kind of different viewpoint. Can you tell us?
Well, I think you have to realize that this view that the barbarians overcame Rome is one, well, the belief of a certain number of people. Historians always argue, and some people have argued, and they're sort of a very important group, that the Roman Empire collapsed for internal reasons, that it was rotted from within, and the barbarians weren't important at all. Others who believed that Rome was sort of pretty solid within would say that the barbarians were responsible. There's always been a group around, a fairly small group to which I belong, to maintain that the Roman Empire, that the barbarians did not destroy the Roman Empire, and for various reasons, such as the barbarians were numerous, they weren't united, they weren't hostile to Rome. They really wanted employment for it, and ideas like that. And what I've tried to do in Rome's Final Conquest is to take these various objections and turn them into a kind of grand narrative that explains how Rome dealt with the barbarians in the late Roman period, and suggests that the outcome of this encounter was a positive one.
One thing aspect of your paper you're talking about is how the ideals of Rome continued, like law and religion and administration continued on into the Middle Ages and even beyond. Can you talk more about that?
Well, I think that you have to understand that Roman culture was the most modern, most up-to-date thing going. It's just a kind of westernization for us. People wanted to have these various things of Rome, and the only thing Rome had to do was to push them into doing so. One of the great examples of this in the 5th, 6th, and so on centuries is the case of Ireland. Now, Ireland was never a part of the Roman Empire, but in the 5th century, it got Roman Christianity, and with it came the Latin language, Latin letters, Latin books, and some Irish people took all this up without even being forced by anybody. They did it spontaneously because it was modernization, what they wanted to do. And at least from that standpoint, Ireland was at least partly drawn into the Mediterranean world.
We're at the International Congress on Medieval Studies here at Western Michigan University. We just had a roundtable discussing your article, which was jam-packed in the room. There was people like outside the room watching in. What did you think of what was said there, and the overall impressions of your paper so far?
Yeah. Well, it's very hard to tell how the future will come out. But this article came out, in April of last year, and in May of last year we kind of planned this session since we thought it might be fun to do it, and I think it has been fun to do it. And I hope that this will help to publicize, and indeed what we're doing now will help to publicize the article. And what comes out of it, heaven knows.
The final question I have is just that you've been a historian of the early Middle Ages, and that era with historians has really changed over the last few decades, where once it was kind of considered the Dark Ages. Now there's quite a different viewpoint about that. I just want you to
people have contested this label, the Dark Ages, for a long time. And though you're right that there's been a lot of activity recently, it could be argued that really this has made very little change in the overall assessment, because for a long time there have been people who had great commitments to the early Middle Ages. You have to know that this is the period of the origins of many European countries like France and Germany and Spain and so on. And the cradle of these countries has been cherished by lots of historians. So it deserves to be said that this label of the Dark Ages is by no means universal, though it has a great deal of currency. You're right about that. But what I always like to say when people speak to me about the Dark Ages is, look at the 20th century. Now that's a real Dark Age, isn't it? You had sort of genocides of Jews, Armenians, Cambodians. You had sort of plagues that carried away 100 million people. You had, two great world wars, more wars. There, if you really want to find a Dark Age, that's a real model for a Dark Age. Back then in the 7th century, we had no such, tragedies and calamities and all that. So, be careful when you use a term like Dark Age. Try to find what you mean by it, and be sure that what you mean is not something really quite benign by comparison with a real Dark Age like the 20th century.
Well, on that note, I will thank you very much.
Thank you for interviewing me.